Hello, everyone, and welcome back to ILSoyAdvisor. I'm Kelsey Litchfield coming to you from West Central Illinois. Before we get started, as always, with our Soy Envoys this morning, let's get a quick look at USDA and their planting progress and conditions report out of Illinois that we can debate later. I hear not everyone's happy about it. So, soybeans planted 81%, up from 72% last week. Emerged is at 58%. Condition ratings, mostly 43% at good, 28% fair, 22% excellent. And the corn planted 89%, up from 80% last week. Emerged is at 78%. Condition ratings, mostly 46% good, 26% excellent, and 24% fair. Winter wheat headed 96%. I've been seeing a lot of wheat from the interstate. Condition ratings 56% good, 22% fair, 17% excellent. Precipitation, rainfall is always a part of this equation, averaged 1.24 inches, which is about 0.2 inches above normal. So now let's go around, give us your crop reports along with anything you've seen while out scouting, anything unusual or maybe not so usual. It's June. We're getting into now the growing season more with planting behind us for some, but maybe not for others. Kelly, you want to give us a lowdown what's been going on in Southern Illinois?
Lots of rain, not much field activity at all. Lots of prevented plant probably going to be taken this week on corn, especially. The big question yesterday was I've got all my P and K on, I've got all my nitrogen on, I've got all my sulfur on. Should I plant soybeans or should I take prevented plant? Even a few people have brought up the M word, Milo, and switching to Milo. Uh, that discussion usually lasts about 2 minutes, and then they remember what Milo is and move on. Um, Overall, I would say we are 75% planted across the southern region, um, and that's misleading. We are maybe 90% planted in some places and maybe 25% planted in others. Um, Crop conditions highly variable, soil conditions highly variable. We're averaging about 2 days a week that we can work pulling soil samples. So if that tells you what field conditions are like, then that means that there's maybe a day or a half a day, a lot of times a week, that guys can get in the field and do anything. Lots of anaerobic conditions. I posted that on my Facebook page last night. I saw one field yesterday. Um, when we pulled in there, there was, I don't know, a couple of dozen geese on the field mowing what was left of the corn off. Um, and I thought, looking at the ground, I thought, well, the geese have crapped all over this field. Well, it wasn't. There's dead earthworms just everywhere on top of the soil surface. You can just see them everywhere. Weeds, unbelievable um, water hemp jungles in a lot of fields that they can't get sprayed. Cover crop fields that have not been terminated are probably in better shape than the ones that were terminated early. Uh, Corn progress V10 to underwater. Soybeans, we've got a lot of soybeans. The March beans look pretty good. They're really a light green color, but they don't look bad. Wheat harvest has started. Um, Moisture ranges from 30 to 14%. A lot of 5 to 21% moisture readings. Yields are nowhere close to what the wheat are predicted. The last 2 weeks with all the rain and the storms, we've had a lot of wheat go down. So a lot of guys are reporting 20 to 40 bushel yield loss where the wheat is laying down. So not test weights so far have been good, but that's all going through dryer. So um, I got a text from one of my customers. I think this sums up where everybody's at. He said, I didn't realize on April the 1st that I would have less than 10 days in June to figure out how to get my wheat cut, beans planted, my double crop beans planted, my corn side dressed, and get everything sprayed in 2024.
Kelly, real quick, do you want to share the video you did a couple weeks ago? What your message was with that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, and I think I got a lot of comments on that video. That number one is sit down and have a plan and just you know um, we've got to think things through, and that's the thing with prevented plant right now is I think that's with a great deal of frustration. That's the easy button, and in most cases it's an easy button that doesn't get you anything. But you got to know what your plan is. You got to write things down. Go back, look at these fields, know what chemicals you've got on them. Know what you've done, what your options are, and really need to be talking to your crop insurance person, your retailer, your seed person. I mean, talking to a couple of seed dealers. I mean, they're scrambling because they're anticipating a lot of corn to be returned and beans to be switched to. And so, with everything else going on, that's, now we start this whole disruption in the supply chain, so to speak. Um, so it's, I don't know, we're wore out. We're all wore out down here. It's, and at the same time, you talk to somebody who's in one of those zones. They were out planting yesterday, and it wasn't planting bad, but yet we can't even drive an ATV across the field in a lot of places.
Definitely a wet spring down in Southern Illinois. Thanks, Kelly. Shelby, we'll head over to you.
Good morning. So lots of things have kind of gone on the last week. After we received our large rain 10 days ago, we got pounded with anything from an inch to 5 inches of rain in this territory. We were all waiting for it to dry out. It dried out fairly quickly, so there were some guys that were able to get back in, get either replant or continue planting where they were. There's a lot of guys that kept saying they had 1 or 2 fields left before that rain started, and we're anxious to get done. Here we're finishing in June, which isn't a terrible thing. There's still opportunity with those fields as long as things continue to pan out well. But a lot of guys got done planting, and yesterday we got pounded with anything from a half inch to 2.5 inches of rain again in territory. So those guys that have replanted their ponds are now looking at ponds, potential replant again. We're not that we can't find anything, but it's hard to find early season corn to replant. There's limited availability. A lot of companies have been cutting inventories, so it's a struggle to make sure we can cover what guys want and need. But we've so far been able to rummage some stuff up that keeps working, and we're getting a little bit returned from growers now as well that we can utilize as well. But out in the countryside, overall, what isn't drowned out looks very good. We've got corn that's moving along very quickly. The soil is warm, so stuff is growing at a fast pace with all of this moisture. We've got anything from about, like Kelly said, drowned out to we're probably about V6. Most of the corn around here, I've seen a lot of guys side dressing already. Haven't really heard any reports or seen anything from black cutworm. If anybody else can uh, chime in on that, really haven't seen anything with what we thought was potentially a big year for them. So I don't know what happened there. If the corn's growing fast enough that we're avoiding it, but really haven't seen anything. I know a couple fields that could have been extreme hot spots for cutworms, and I haven't seen anything. So that's a plus. Water hemp continues to be the biggest issue around here. Now that it has rained again, it is going to be hard to control water hemp that is getting to be 8-10 inches tall. I'm afraid we're headed in a direction again that is going to be difficult to control that and see some see some issues again with what I was hoping was going to be a good year of control. Since we were spraying a little later, we would be able to control a lot of that we had from last year. But Mother Nature is not agreeing with us. So, but otherwise, I mean, things look good. Guys are not too down in spirits, which is a good thing. So if we can avoid some large rainfall, hopefully we can, the rest of the year will pan out decently and try and squeeze in getting side dress and spraying done in between everything else, and we'll see how it pans out.
Thanks, Shelby. Eric, we'll go down to you for your report.
Yeah, so with some of what everybody else has echoed, with rain events and everything, no different for me. More corn that I look at in our area, I refer back to when the planting dates were, and I continue to see the crop that was planted around mid-April, maybe still struggling, showing some of those shortcomings, those less than ideal planting conditions that a lot of crop went into in mid-April. So seems like, there's a couple dates every year that maybe wasn't the best time to be planting. And for me, it looks like, I'm still going to really go back to that around that April 14th, a few days either way, the 14th. But just we think about all the conditions going after that. So I would really still encourage growers that if you do have crops that were planted around that time frame, that you go back and look at those crops, see what type of shape they are in, and take note. The other thing I'd like to note is that there is going to be a lot of corn that is, it's either, you're kind of in that V6, maybe even V7 time frame. But we do have a lot of corn in the area that is making that transition from the growing point being below ground to being above ground. And so I've recently this week, I've fielded quite a few calls. Why is some of my corn in my fields yellow or maybe not as green? Well, a lot of it I think is contributed to is maybe those lower lying areas of the field. Maybe there was some compaction or whatnot that's causing some of those off color of plants and everything. And it's just and really it's simply that there was something that put the seed behind a little bit, and then we're still, we don't have fully developed roots yet and everything. So I encourage growers, take note of those areas, still be a little bit patient, and if possible, maybe there's an opportunity to address that with some side dress operations. Like the last couple of years, sulfur has been a big topic for corn and soybeans. The last 2 years was because of a different, causal agent, being dry conditions, not a lot of soil microbial activity. Well, this year we've got an abundance of moisture, and sulfur is an anion, kind of is like nitrogen, so it is susceptible to leaching. So if we haven't had in-season sulfur applications, we could be losing some sulfur just because of the excessive moisture and everything we have. So continue to echo the importance of sulfur for both corn and soybeans. And then even soybeans, there's going to be a lot of soybeans. I refer to it every year. They kind of go through an ugly duckling phase around that, some of those early V stages. And that there again, it's simply as we do not have fully developed roots yet, and likely we don't have nodules yet. So if growers are seeing soybeans that seem to be kind of hanging out and kind of maybe turned an off color to what they were, say last week, dig up some soybean plants, take a look at the roots and everything, and see if nodules are getting developed and everything, because likely that's the cause. This time of year is also another great time for sulfur, for even some top dress sulfur applications like dry AMS. And then if you have the capabilities even to add some other things in with that sulfur, say like an iron or molybdenum type product, all those type of things can really help with early season photosynthesis, and also with nodule production and everything. So not to put on my sales or my retail cap, but just, a few things from field trials, from my own personal experiences in the past, can really complement a soybean crop this time of year.
Thanks, Eric. Craig, I'll jump it over to you.
Yeah, I would echo what Shelby and Eric have said. I've also traveled a little further outside of the territory here, and I'll say, mostly central Illinois still. I haven't gotten far north or far south, but it's highly variable across the countryside. I mean, everybody's in a different scenario, and I think it was Kelly that said, make sure you know what each field's got going on, because everything's at a different growth stage. It's got probably a different situation. that you know, you're going to need to keep track of, because it just seems like it's a widespread of things going on in each area. But yeah, I'm still coming across every now and then a field that hasn't been planted yet. A lot of ponds. You know, it's hit and miss wherever you go. Just depends on what got rain, what didn't. Seeing a lot of people going through with their 4-row planters, so I'm assuming that's not a research planter like what I'm used to. I'm guessing they're filling in their ponds. Side dressing is I've seen that some where it's fit. And then, you know, any kind of post application and herbicides going on. I would also say that, you know, like waterhemp, I also was at a field there in Christian County where a second flush of grass was coming on, and they had already sprayed it once. So I was like, well, they may need to come back and hit this again. Now, again, it was a research field, and sometimes we can have some higher pressure with weeds because of alleys and inbreds and things like that. So not uncommon, but, you know, be concerned, because some of these fields are not fully canopied like maybe we'd like in June. So you may have a second flush with all the rain. Compaction streaks are easy to see across the countryside. You know, I can see it in our plots. I can see it traveling down the road at 55 miles an hour. It's out there. The other thing I'll bring up, maybe people have seen, is some tar spot sightings. I don't know that anything has officially been confirmed under a microscope yet, but things have been found outside of this state. So I've had some conversations internally with, you know, is it right, or, you know, is it diagnosed yet or confirmed through a microscope? And I don't know that that's true yet, but they're working on it. So I would also say that tar spot, with all the rains we've had in some of those early planted cornfields, those would be conditions that might be ripe. Now, some of the stuff that's not canopied yet and got a long way to go, I'm not concerned there. So it's going to be hit and miss on trying to find it. But that was one thing I thought I'd bring up. I don't know that we need to sound the alarm bells yet, but it's something to think about. If you've got those early planted fields that look really good and have a high yield potential, fungicide would be a recommendation. I think it's too late for those to do anything now, like a V4 or a V7 application. You're probably too late for that. So it's that main timing for tar would be, you know, that VTR1 stage would be, if you're going to spray anything, that's when you need to do it. And I would say at a higher rate than normal. But yeah, it's widely variable across the state. I have seen, the other thing with soy, yesterday I was traveling around Farmer City and saw some dips in fields where things were starting to yellow up pretty good on soybeans. So I would attribute that to, yeah, like Eric said, lack of maybe some root development, nodulation, and so on and so forth there. So starting to see that too. That was the first I'd seen it, was yesterday. So yeah.
Thanks, Craig.
Yep.
Excuse me. I don't know where my voice is this morning. I must have not done my voice exercises. I'm just joking. Thanks, Craig. Karen, hand it over to you. I was in Bloomington yesterday. I got off Carlock because my GPS told me to, and I rode around the countryside to Goodfield. So I definitely saw what you've been talking about the past couple of weeks with the ponding. Some of those fields, I saw a couple still not planted. So I was in your neck of the woods and thought, yep, Karen was right.
Yes, the ponds that we had finally got down came back last week. We had 2.5 inches, or 2.6 actually. So quite a bit of the flooding is back. The other things we're just kind of looking at, like you said, if you drive on 150, you can get to a stop sign and 3 out of the 4 corners won't be planted. So there's a lot of cover crop fields that are terminated, but nothing has been planted into them yet. For me, June 6th, I mean, my cutoff date for corn is usually about June 10th. So that there's some decisions that are going to be needing to be made here soon. So just make sure you know what herbicides you have on, what your, situation is per field. There's 2 fields across the road from each other that are 5 leaves apart. There's some V1 corn and then there's some V6 corn. So if you're out and about spraying, you can't do the same thing on every field. You need to make sure that you check and that you're not past some of your herbicide restrictions, because I think people think with herbicide resistant corn, it's resistant forever. And that's not the case. We still have a lot of restrictions at particularly the V7, V8 stages. And the crop is much more prone to crop injury if sprayed after those restrictions. So people need to be careful and abide by the labels because it's not tolerant forever. Even with Roundup Ready corn, the closer it gets into the reproductive stages, the less tolerant it is. I think with Roundup Ready soybeans that are completely resistant, people kind of got, I don't know, tricked into a falsehood that all herbicide resistant crops are that way, and that's just not the case. So you need to stay on the labels and make sure that you don't cause any more yield loss that could be prevented since you don't have a control over everything. The other thing I would mention is that the lightning bugs are out, which means the corn rootworms are starting to hatch. So we've had enough growing degree units for that. I had a question yesterday for seed corn that hasn't been given the go ahead to plant yet. They thought since it was so late, they didn't need to put an insecticide on for rootworm. And to me, that's actually much more susceptible because those will be the small corn. And with the rootworms hatching in those fields, I think it's even more important to make sure that you have an insecticide on there if it's not traded. So outside of that, same thing as everybody else. The ponds, things haven't really changed, I'd say, over the last week or so. We have had some sunshine in between, so what is out there has been growing, but I don't know. It's still a little depressing, I think.
Planting season that never ends. Thanks, Karen. And Drew, we'll round it out with you.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to say anything that's too riveting compared to everybody else. I will definitely concur with a lot of Eric's points on the ugly duckling season. The last few weeks, I've been averaging about 1,000 miles, looking at on service calls and looking at stuff for guys, and it's definitely in the ugly duckling phase of the growing season. To start on corn, so kind of actually, Shelby, to kind of come back to your point with cutworm, we did get some fairly serious feeding north of 80 on some organics. That was the only of it that I really saw that was heavy in our territory. And that there were some fields that actually did have to be replanted because there was really nothing else we could do. One weird fact about it, or what seemed to be, was that they actually seemed to prefer the more worked ground than the no-till or the high residue ground or the cover crop ground, which just seemed weird. That's kind of counterintuitive to what we would think they would be doing, but that was just one thing that we did kind of notice as a trend this year. But talking about corn, again, that ugly rootworm or ugly duckling phase is in full effect. We have a lot of rapid growth going on throughout the territory. Are starting to see some of the quote unquote sins of the planter that live with us all year long. We are seeing some hatchet rips where stuff was planted a little bit too wet, and we did have a little bit maybe too much downforce in that field, and we're starting to see some of those things shine through with reduced growth. And they're patchy, they're not whole fields, but guys are definitely noticing it as they're side dressing and spraying. We're getting a lot more of those calls as those activities are functioning in the territory that the guys are out in the field and seeing more of that. One thing to remember too, I would don't know, application corn. This corn is very brittle as we're making these applications, especially as we're putting on a dicamba or something along those lines. We are seeing some crop response through in some areas from that. So again, not trying to raise an alarm and say don't spray dicamba, but don't be surprised as rapid as this crop is growing if we see a little bit of response from that. Crop is kind of responding really well from the hail events that we had last year. A lot of regrowth. Soybean fields are looking like you don't really see them much at all, or see much that has been broken off from them. Did actually see my first blooms field of soybeans. So we did have some fields going into R1. Just a kind of reminder to guys that planted maybe beans in that mid-April timeframe that Liberty herbicides and some of the other herbicides have a reproductive cutoff, and we were actually starting to enter those. So a little bit of just a reminder there to check some of these fields because they might be a little bit further along than you think they are just based on when they were planted. Outside of that, we're actually, compared to Southern Illinois and a lot of other areas, we're moving along very nicely. We had some nice planting windows. A lot of this crop looks really good, and I would say we're just isolated down to just parts of fields and small instances that are kind of negative. Oh, and we're seeing some Group 15 herbicide symptomology too, residual pros, things like that were sprayed pre-emerge. We're starting to see that heart-shaped leaf a little bit that we'll get out of those. Nothing to be super concerned about. It's going to grow out of it, but we are seeing that as well.
Thanks, Drew. Dang it. I'm going to have to edit all these out. That's okay. That's why we're not live. Thanks, Drew. So one question I have for all of you, the 6-a-day temperature prediction, it's looking cooler temperatures than normal, along with they're looking at a dry spell. I probably shouldn't say dry couple of days. So cooler temperatures, below normal precipitation. Will this affect the crop at all? Anything to be aware of with those conditions? Or not a big deal at all? You're like, we need some dryness. Maybe I'm looking more at the cooler temperatures for this early in June.
It, I mean, just listing, if you listen to the whole discussion, cooler temperatures, um, in a normal year, whatever the hell that is anymore. Um, yeah, they might have some impact, but I mean, at this point, no, I mean, we're not worried about, I mean, we've got a chance of 6 days of no rain here coming after Saturday. Um, we're more focused on the 6 days of rain than cooler temperatures, or 6 days of no rain than cooler temperature.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Definitely looking forward to some dry periods. I will say in here in West Central, where I'm located, we could use rain. It avoided us Wednesday night, went north and south of us and didn't hit us. There's a couple fields I think that could use a nice drink of water. So my last question for you guys, and I know this probably goes against everything that you do, and it's way too freaking early, but I have to ask. I want to ask about your soybean yield predictions. Now, you don't have to give me, you can give me a specific number. You can just throw it out there like 51 or whatever, or looking at it, are we not going to reach top yields? I kind of want to just get your thoughts on yield right now, just in your area. Um, some predictions, and then we can revisit this back in the fall and see how we did. So like I said, there's a lot more that this crop has to go through. We're in June 6th. We're so early, but I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on yield prediction right now?
Wow, you really like to stir things up, don't you? I think a lot of it is going to be lower just because we did not get in early enough in order to plant. And a lot of the yields, higher yields, come with a longer flowering period. So it's hard to have high yields if you don't have fields planted, obviously. But I think that top 15 bushels, I don't think we're going to see a lot of 85s. I think we're going to be more in the 65, 55 to 65 range in most places.
I would agree, unless they opted to plant the beans early and leave the corn back, which I think some people did. But yeah, I agree. I think it'll be below average.
I'm going to put on my Emerson Knapsinger's hat and and I'm going to be like, tell me more, and it depends, and I'll talk around in a circle and come back and still leave with you an open-ended question. I think this is going to be really a year of, let's have a conversation. When did planting occur? Did you get planted in April? What things are you going to be willing to do to that crop in season to manage it, to push potential? Are you still going to be, this morning I've been putting together finishing touches for, for our fungicide kickoff season, to kind of start thinking about fungicide applications. So, are you still willing to put money into this crop even with fungicide applications? So I think it's still wide open. Maybe the 100 bushel thing is off the table, but I still think it's wide open that, there's still a lot of fate to be determined here yet. And so I'm not giving up on any crop, and I'm still going to remain optimistic.
You tell me what the weather is going to be in August, and I'll tell you what your bean yields are going to be.
Exactly, Kelly.
I mean, we've planted beans. Some of my best soybeans were double crops on July the 4th, made 70 bushel an acre. So this planting date stuff and yeehaw and all that, I mean, who cares? It's the weather after you plant.
Yeah, and I would say the answer from our area is yes. I mean, I think we had definitely have the opportunity for some very high soybean yields. Again, fields that are already flowering, and then there's some fields that they're going to struggle, and they're going to struggle from things that we don't even know yet or haven't even seen yet. So I think there's going to be there's going to be fields that guys are pleasantly surprised with and excited about, and there's going to be fields that, well, why didn't I do a little bit better?
I'll throw one more thing in there, and that's that the conditions to which they're planted in. So right now, I think there's a lot of fields in Southern Illinois that the soybeans in the bag have more yield potential than the ones in the field.
I was going to say what Kelly said is, what conditions did you plant into? It was difficult to find ideal time here the last month to plant in this territory. So there was a lot of stuff that was planted into moderate conditions. So, our root development is going to be a lot different. But I think there's still some fields that have very, very good potential. There's other fields that have drowned outs in different territories. Those are going to have problems. But I think there's still opportunity. There's a lot of summer to go. We're going to get drier at some point, and beans do enjoy a little bit of a dry spell. So there's still opportunity there.
I had to ask that question. Stephanie did a media interview the other day, and she said she got that question. And I thought, well, I'll ask it on the podcast. I know you guys don't want to answer that, and I know there's still a lot of growing season to go, but, just out of curiosity. But kind of left that on a high note. So time will tell. Maybe we'll revisit all this in a month and see how things are, but we still got a lot of growing season to go. So we'll definitely keep tabs on that. We'll go ahead and end it here. Our half hour's up. So thank you all so much, just as always, for providing your input and opinion on this weekly podcast and telling us what's going around across the state. So we'll talk to you again next Thursday. Thanks all.